So let's jump straight into 317. This is one of the prakim where the introduction of the Mishnah Brura is very, very important, because it's not so clear exactly what the shittas of the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah are if you just study them. But the Mishnah Brura clarifies it very effectively. So he starts off by saying, as we mentioned, there are some knots that are chayev doraita, there are some that's asur derabanan, and there are some that are mutar lechatchila. And the question is, what defines those? So you have two shittas in the Rishonim, and the Shulchan Aruch is taking one, the Ramah is taking the other. Shulchan Aruch says that these three things are defined by, if it has both a professional knot and a permanent knot, then it's chayev doraita. If it is professional but not permanent, or permanent but not professional, then it's asur derabanan. And if it is neither professional nor permanent, then it is mutar lechatchila. The Ramah's shitta is that the type of knot is meaningless. He says discard that criterion of professionalism. If it is a permanent knot, it's asur deraita. If it's a semi-permanent knot, it's asur midarabanan. And if it's a completely temporary knot, then it's mutar lechatchila. How do we go? So we generally take on the chumras of both. In other words, where's the chumrah of the mechaber? If it's a professional knot for less than a day, the mechaber would still say it's asur derabanan, even though the Ramah would say it's mutar derabanan. Where do you see the chumrah of the Ramah? Is that if it's a regular knot for 2 weeks, even though the mechaber would say that that's mutar, it's a regular knot and it's not permanent, the Ramah would say that's asur because it's semi-permanent. So we hold for both chumras as a general rule, and that's what they lay out in the beginning in their shittas.
And why can't we do double knots on Shabbos Mashal basis?
I will come to double knots in a little while. So what we're going to have to define is, when we're talking about these different lengths of time, so what's permanent? But our permanent's easy. Permanence is literally forever. Give me an example of a permanent knot. And permanent doesn't mean it necessarily is going to be permanent, but it's intended to be permanent.
And not too tight on a plastic bag that you throw away.
Plastic bag throw away is a good example. Tefillin knot, tzitzit knot. Right? All of those are good examples. And the easiest way, I would say, to violate this malacha is by tightening your tzitzit. Because we're going to see that tightening is the same as tying. And so since tzitzit are a permanent knot, that's problematic. Okay. So let's define the time periods of year. I said permanent's easy, semi-permanent and temporary.
Finishing, in terms of finishing and...
I'm not sure about finishing, because it is halachically tzitzit even if the knot's loose. In fact, as long as it's got that bottom knot, then it's the bottom double knot, then it's tzitzit. So everything else is minhag, yeah. Sam, could you pour me some Coke Zero, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. So, the next thing is what's temporary. And in this, the Ramah gives two shittas. Again, more machmir and more makel. The more machmir shitta is less than 24 hours is temporary. More than 24 hours is semi-permanent. And permanent is forever. So anywhere from 24 hours until forever is semi-permanent. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And then the second shitta gives us a week. Less than a week is temporary. Between a week and forever is semi-permanent. And permanent is permanent. Those are his two shittas. One other important thing that the Mishnah Brura says is that when we talk about a professional knot, that has nothing to do with how tightly you have tied it or how difficult a knot it is to tie or untie. He says it's based only on the kind of knot. Okay, he says that right at the beginning. Even if it's not tied well and it's possible to untie it with one hand, that can still be chayev doraita because it won't come undone by itself. It's a kind of knot that won't come undone by itself. So Sorry?
According to the Mechaber.
Well, we're talking about professional knots in the Din Mechaber. Again, the Ramah is not interested in Maaseh Uman, right? In a professional knot. So it's in the Din Mechaber, which we take the Chumrah as well. Now there are those I've seen Sifra Halacha write about whether it can be undone with one hand or whatever else. Maybe that's different shittas, but that's not the Mishnah Brura over here. Okay. Then goes in to say now we're talking about what kind of knot. Okay, so now we've understood that temporary permanent. The Ramah says that as you said, some are lenient, and the main shitta is the shitta that we're lenient, but we try to keep the other one. In other words, if you can do it, even if you can make sure that you're not tying knots that are going longer than a day and shorter than a week, try to avoid it. But if you have to, it's not such a big deal to do it. You're allowed to rely on that lenient opinion. Okay. Then what kind of knots are professional knots or not? So the Ramah says, if it's two knots on top of one another, we're already worried. So that's what they call a granny knot. It's a double knot. Right? You know, you take two things, you tie it once, and then you tie it again. So that double knot, the Ramah says, from there already you must worry.
That shows permanence.
It's not that it shows permanence, it's that it's a professional knot. They're two different criteria. Ein anu bekin as a mikra kesher shel uman is his lashon there. She says it's about the form, the style of the knot. And then he points out as well, that we mentioned in Shul, that a knot that you're not allowed to, that you're forbidden to tie, you're also forbidden to untie. Okay. Then he says, nevertheless, in a case of pain, you're allowed to untie such a knot, this double knot, because it's only an Isser D'Rabbanan. So he's saying when it's not there forever, then it's only an Isser D'Rabbanan. That everyone would agree on, and therefore you're allowed to do it. And then he says as well, this that we permit, I beg your pardon, this that we say, once it's two knots on top of one another, that's problematic. So that and anything more professional than that is problematic. So we really take on that chumrah of this double knot. Anything more than that is problematic. But when you're talking about a single knot, a piece of string, where it's tied through itself, that's immediately problematic. Now I'll tell you where this comes up often, is that when people tie up a challah bag or something like that. So let's say it's that plastic packet, they take that and they just tie it around through itself. So that already is considered a kesher uman. That's already considered a professional knot. And you would be forbidden to Rabbanan to untie that on Shabbat. Even though it's not permanent, so the Ramah wouldn't worry about it. Because he says it's not permanent.
It's not been made on Shabbat.
Well, firstly, it could be that it was made on Friday. So, but let's say if you get it Friday night, right? You've got it. It's temporary, very temporary. It was only, the bachan was only baked, yesterday or whatever, or today. So, according to the Shit of the Ramah, you wouldn't have a problem. But since this is a concern of a Kesher Uman, so therefore you're going to have to break open the bag rather than deal with the knot itself. Nissim Mark.
How come tying like the bow in your shoe isn't it not on top of the knot?
Okay, so we haven't talked about the bow in your shoe. So now the Mishnah Brura deals with it. So the Ramah doesn't say anything about that, but the Mishnah Brura deals with it. Is that he says, let me see exactly where it is. Okay, I'm just trying to find where he says it. Is it further on? But he speaks. The Mishnah Brura speaks about these kinds of knots. And what he says is that you are allowed to do a double bow. You're allowed to do a bow, which is not the same as a knot, and you're now allowed to do a bow on top of a bow. And then he even says you're allowed to do a bow on top of a knot. Okay, so let's think about all three of these. A shoelaces is a bow on top of a knot. Now, there's some people who never learn to tie their shoelaces properly, and so they just do a bow. That for sure would be good. But even a bow on top of a knot, he says, is all right. Now, the question comes up, what about what they call double laces? Which is a knot on top of a bow on top of a knot.
No, it's a bow on top of a bow.
A bow on top of a bow on top of a knot?
Yeah.
Let's discuss whether the top one's a bow or not, but okay, we'll go with that one for now. So a bow on top of a bow on top of a knot, what about that? So that they don't address, but I'll come back to that in a second. I just want to see this, I'm going to find this Mishna Brura.
Yeah, no, it's actually more.
Yeah, must be on the next page. Okay, so what I will tell you with that, with the shoelaces, with the double knot in your shoelaces, the double bow in your shoelaces, there's a bow on top of a bow on top of a knot, so you could see room to be machmir. And there are those who are machmir. When we did this at Yeshiva with Rabbi Goldstein, later became Chief Rabbi Goldstein, so he says, firstly there's a safek as to whether this is a kesher shalkaima. Kesher Uman, whether this is really, whether this falls under like a double knot. Is the double bow on top of a knot as bad as a double knot? That's the first suffix. The second suffix is a double knot actually problematic? Remember, he said we can't do a double knot because maybe it's already a Kesher Uman. We're not sure if our double bow is as bad as a double knot, and we're not sure if a double knot is a Kesher Uman. Even if it's a Kesher Uman, we're not sure that that's the correct opinion. Because the Ramah, remember, isn't worried about the Kesher Uman, he's only worried about the duration. So the Machaber is worried about Kesher Uman. So we're not sure if this is the kind of knot that's maybe problematic. We're not sure if that kind of knot is problematic. And we're not sure if the Shitta is the one that we follow. So he says, because you've got so many Sveikot, he joked and he said it's a mitzvah to do it. And he was joking. But the point that he was making is that it's hard to make an Isser because there are all these Sveikot, so therefore he permitted it in that case. The next halacha the Shulchan Aruch says is you are allowed, so this now isn't technically about knotting, but your shoe has come undone. Now they're talking about these sandals with all these straps that go whatever. The whole sandals come undone. You can thread it all back through. Two conditions. Or let's rather look at it differently. There are two possible problems with threading it all back through. Can anyone tell me what they are?
Finishing.
I know.
One problem is tying. So in fact, there are three possible problems actually. So there's the problem of tying it. So the answer is so you can't tie. What are the other possible problems? Fixing or creating is in this case even more. Is that you have a non-working or a non-item and you're turning it into an item, a working item. Matake and mana. So that's the second one. Now how do we get around that? Well, we say it's like this. If this is the first time you're putting the shoe together, then you're turning it from a non-shoe into a shoe. That's a problem. But if it just kind of came unraveled and you're putting it back together again, then that's not a problem. And then there's a third potential issue.
Tying it in.
No, that we mentioned already. There would be an issue of tying, then you wouldn't be allowed to tie. The third issue is torach, bother, effort, trouble. You're not allowed to do something that's going to create a lot of bother or trouble. Yeah. The Shulchan Aruch says, or the Ramah says, because we're worried that you might then come to tie it. But that's the issue as well. But the Mishnah Brura clarifies that they're really two different factors. One is we're concerned sometimes you're going to tie, and the other one is if it's a lot of trouble. So what would you say about your shoelace snaps, and you want to rethread your shoelace, you want to put in a new shoelace on Shabbos? What would you say about that?
I can't go with it before.
So you're not turning it from a non-shoe into a shoe. It was a shoe, and the truth is you could wear it. It wouldn't be very comfortable, whatever, but you could wear it without, and it was a shoe before, so that's number one. Number two, is there a concern that you might come to tie? I don't think so. We don't tie our shoelaces to lock them into place. No. And the third one, is it a lot of trouble? Yeah. That would depend on the, God bless you, shoe and laces. Yeah. Good.
What happens if shoelace breaks? You haven't got another shoelace. So some people, try to tie that. That's like a proper knot.
So that would be, it's threading it through itself, right? Like the challah packet. So that would be problematic.
But then you can't carry on. So now your Shabbos thing will be unsure.
I'll just tell you, that's the argument that people who don't keep Shabbos always say. Well, what are we supposed to do? Climb up 5 flights of stairs. Okay, so you climb up that thorn, so that's the same, that's the same thing.
Sorry, well, I can ask you, if you were to make it like a knot, you got a couple of cups like this.
Yes.
You make the knot on the end.
No. That's like the challah bag. No.
Any knot you want.
So you have to break the plastic.
Yes.
In a place separate from the knot. See, because cutting a knot, we might see this now, cutting a knot is the same as untying a knot.
So that same principle you just showed there, but the same as cut up on the knife. The cut is hard, so you can't go undo that. You've got to go and... Alright.
Exactly.
So if the knot was here,
Yes.
cut under.
Yeah, that would be fine.
No, but if it was
But don't cut the knot itself.
Cut under.
Don't do that.
cut over
When you
here.
say cut, take the knife and cut.
You can take a knife and cut, or you can break it with your fingers, whatever you prefer.
And if you cut it over here, it's also breaking the whole pack.
Well, you're going to use the challah and you can still use the spine.
Yeah.
Or you could use the colour.
It's actually more trouble than making it clean.
No. There was a cleat before, not making a new cleat. The packet is full of cleat.
Okay, and then the Shulchan Aruch goes into similar cases where the dry cleaner or the tailor does these knots around the top of the shirt, around the collar. So the collar arrives knotted, and you've got to undo these knots before you can wear the shirt. So there again, if it's a new shirt, that's considered mataken man. It's like you're making a shirt. And if it's an old shirt, you've got to look at what kind of knot it is, and that sometimes is problematic. Then they talk about buckets at the well. And so again, this is what you see with Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch is written to give you practical everyday cases. Problem is, practical everyday cases from the 1600s are not the same as practical cases in the 21st century, but we still see a lot of the principles and then we try to carry it across. So they're talking about tying the bucket for the well. And can you use a belt or a rope or something like that? And he says, you just can't use the regular rope. You can use a belt or a string, but not the regular rope. When we're talking about...
You can use that today.
When we're talking about wells that... we don't have wells.
No, you're carrying out the grey water.
Carrying the...
Grey water.
Yeah, but you're not dipping it into the well to bring it up. Okay, but he says then also it depends on how it works with the bucket. Is it a bucket that's fixed in the well, a bucket that's not fixed in the well? Okay, this is what I was looking for. Halacha hey. Halacha hey, you see the discussion about bows and knots that we mentioned. Shulchan Aruch says, Aniva mutar delav keshehu. A bow is permissible because it isn't a knot, it's a bow. And the Ramah says, even if there is a knot underneath, we have heter in such a case. So that's where you see the idea of the shoelaces, the regular way, I would say, of doing the shoelaces. But then you see as well, so the Mishnah Brura firstly adds in over here. This is all speaking about when you are going to untie those shoelaces on that day. But what if you're not going to untie those shoelaces? So then that's going to be a problem because now you're leaving it for more of a permanent time. Now, according to the strict opinion, you have to be committed to untying it within 24 hours. According to the lenient opinion, you have to be committed to untying it within a week. So, one second. So you tie your shoes Shabbos morning, and if you have a minhag of kicking off your shoes Saturday night and not looking at your Shabbos shoes again until next week Friday afternoon, so you already would have to rely on the lenient opinion. if you want to be able to carry on doing that. If you want to be strict, rely on the strict opinion, then you have to untie your shoes Saturday night. Then what some people, now asked Chief Rabbi as well, for some reason this shiur was very clear in my mind, my memory. So I asked him as well, I said, so what if you have the minhag of tying your shoelaces and leaving them tied long time? You just slip your shoes on and off, right up until the shoelaces themselves become undone. And by themselves, and then that's only right. So it could be a month later that you end up doing that. So what would you say about that? Now, I want to tie those shoes on Shabbos morning, because now they're not slipped. But when am I going to untie it? I don't know, a month from now. So what would you say about such a case?
That's permanent then, isn't it?
Semi-permanent.
You said 22 weeks, you said 2 weeks.
Permanent means forever. Semi-permanent is from a day or a week, between a day or a week and forever. So if we're talking 2 weeks, so what would we say? We'd say that's asur. So I asked Chief Rabbi Goldstein, so what should a person do in such a case? And his answer was, in such a case, a person should get with the program. And in other words, untie your shoes more frequently. Yehuda.
First of all, if when it means to come and it means to last forever, there's no none in the whole world that's permanent. Most knots eventually, like after a year, 2 years, 3 years, undo.
I'm not sure that that's true. Again, look at tzitzit and tefillin as examples.
Yeah.
And that's like it's made to last.
Yeah, the kavanah is...
Yeah, but again, what Jared is saying is even if you intend for it to last forever, it's not going to last forever. I'm saying I'm not sure. I mean, tzitzit and tefillin last pretty much forever.
If you don't like tighten it, it's just not all unravel.
That one might, but all the ones in the middle won't.
I should play with it.
Yeah.
That's how you
And even that one, it's because it's constant friction and and tugging at it and everything.
And the feeling also doesn't.
Yeah. So I'm not sure that I accept your premise. Your brother's saying even if we accept your premise, there's the intention, which is fair enough. But I'm saying I still don't accept your premise. I think some knots, it's fair to say that they are permanent knots.
But also, that's why I don't wear usually knots in them. I don't wear my shampoo don't.
Yeah, so I don't like to be too many digressions, but it's just a good story that there was a thing in the shidduch world at one time of asking whether the guy wears slip-ons or lace-up shoes. And this was somehow seen as relevant information for a shidduch. And I think they asked Rabbi Mordechai Gifter, I think it was. So he said he couldn't work it out. Is it in praise if he wears lace shoes? Because it shows he's willing to pay attention to what he's doing. And it's a bad thing if he wears slip-ons because he's lazy. Or is it a good thing if he wears slip-ons because he's not wasting time with his shoes and he's able to spend more time studying Torah? But he said, what a stupid thing to make the criteria of the person you're going to marry. Okay, I don't know if it was a gift. I remember hearing that story. Okay.
Sometimes the tie, you pull it.
Yeah.
Knots.
Yes.
And some people
Correct.
do it and they take it off.
Now I heard that when it comes to a tie, that one would therefore have to do a half Windsor, because a half Windsor comes completely undone when you pull it off.
Yeah, we tell us.
Whereas a full Windsor or one of the others create that knot when you come through. Now I asked that to Rabbi David Goldfein once, and it was like he hadn't heard of that before. And he wears a tie every shower. It's like he hadn't. I don't know if he had or he hadn't. I'm just saying his reaction was like he hadn't heard of that before. So I said, so is that the case? Kind of shrugged. So I don't know. I see in the Dirshu notes that they have a thing over here. So let's maybe take a quick look. This is number 37 regarding the necktie, which is done for adornment, for beauty. If it's done in a way that when you take it off the one part of the knot, the whole thing unravels, then Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says you view this like a bow on top of a knot. In other words, like doing your shoelaces. And therefore, only do it if your intention is to take it off within 24 hours. So you can do it if your intention is to take it. That's Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. On the other hand, Rav Karelit said that even if it's really well attached, you're allowed to tie it and untie it, even if it's only going to be for a long time. However, if you're doing it like as a real permanent knot, that you then just hang it up in your cupboard, just tighten and loosen it each time, then you're not allowed to do such a knot on Shabbos, because then it's considered creating the tie, if that's how you wear your ties.
And then on Shabbos put the tie on.
Yeah, that he didn't have a problem with. That's Rav Karelit. And then he says, and when it comes to a tie, that would only come undone if you would actually undo it. So you're talking now like a full Windsor. So he says, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says, that is like tying the challah bag through itself. And therefore that's going to be a problem, and so you're not allowed to do that. And that was Rav Elyashiv as well. Okay, so even though I don't know if there's a broad halachic literature on ties, what the Dirshu notes bring, and no giving a share under the auspices of Dirshu, so I'm not saying this as a criticism or ingratitude. Remember, the Dirshu notes are bringing a very specific slice within the poskim. Yeah, I asked the question. They published it in the Dirshu newsletter a couple of years ago. I asked the question when they speak about saying Shema in the presence of a woman who isn't dressed properly. So they bring in the notes that this even applies with a married woman who doesn't cover her hair even today, that you're not allowed to say Shema in such a case, and like it doesn't count. That's the opinion of the Mishnah Brura. And they bring that everyone who agrees with the Mishnah Brura. If you can see her, if you can't see her, okay. But what that means is, in Garden Shul and Marais Road Shul and any shul where you can actually see across the gallery or see across the Mechetz Sfari Shul, whatever else, right? Any such case, that the men actually aren't allowed to say Shema. Now that's the chumrah of the Mishnah Brura. Now the Aruch HaShulchan argues with the Mishnah Brura, and the Aruch HaShulchan says, even though a married woman obviously has to cover her hair, nowadays, since so many women don't cover their hair, if it's the issue, if it's something else, with bare shoulders or whatever, it's a different issue. But if it's the issue of a married woman with uncovered hair, you are still allowed to say Shema in her presence. That's the Aruch HaShulchan. Now I can tell you, all of us living in Cape Town, I think, rely on the Aruch HaShulchan. And yet they didn't quote it in the Dirshu notes. So I asked Rabbi Brett, and I think he asked Rabbi Tabak, and Rabbi Tabak wrote about it in one of the newsletters. And the answer basically was, the notes are not comprehensive. The notes are bringing a specific slice of the poskim, and so you're getting a bigger picture than what you just have, from the Mishnah Brura, but there could well be other poskim that are just not making it into the notes. From the notes, they're saying, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach and Rav Elyashiv saying, the correct tie is the half Windsor. Yehuda.
First of all, did Rav Elyashiv also undo the tie? Like the Shabbos, I tried it a half Windsor, I can't mess it up. I did it forward, and then I want to rechange, and then I did it forward. Then I want to know if I can undo the knot, because I want to redo the tie, and then I just got a new tie. The Shabbos.
Yes.
So I've got 3 ties.
Yeah. Look, that's what it seems from here. There's, again, me'idach. So they bring it in contradistinction to Rav Shlomo Zalman. Me'idach, data gaon Rav Nisim Karedet, she'af im ha'aniva mudeket. Even if the knot is tight or is firmly attached, mutar lekosher ulatira. You are allowed to tie it and untie it. Va'af im enu asir ulatira ela lizman merubah, even if it won't be for a long time. So you really have to look there. They quote here the Chut Shani Perek Lamed Dalet Sif Katan Zion. So take a look there if you really want to look up that shitta. This is more for reference.
What do they how can they allow you to tie that side?
So the question is it really considered a knot? I mean, it's not like your shoelaces. Because what's the knot over here? I mean, it's around your neck and it's, slides in and out. It's a different kind of construction. Comes these different knots. It's Zal Chochma of tying knots. They did it in the Boy Scouts. They did those kind of things.
There's one other thing that my question was, should we still talk about the problem like says women who aren't dressed in the most clearest ways that their shoulders aren't covered? Surely then we should try move away, maybe move behind the.
Or you just look through it.
Is it about looking, but about seeing them, or is it about?
But if you turn them off, you turn them in the same direction.
Your ability to be able to see them.
Ability to be able to see them is an issue. So look, I can tell you that's why, for example, I can just speak for Marshall. We please God, one day we're doing the mechitza. We were trying to do it for some years. So the question came up, could we have a glass mechitza? According to halacha, you can have a glass mechitza. Rav Moshe, for example, is very clear that the purpose of the mechitza is not to prevent people seeing one another. The purpose of the mechitza is to prevent people touching one another. So if it's a glass mechitza, then people aren't going to be able to touch one another. However, what I said was, the mechitza has to have some form of translucence, some form of semi-opaqueness. Can't be just 100% see-through. Because what happens if one Friday night you have a lady who doesn't know the correct shul dress code and comes in, and then all the men sitting opposite, are not able to say the Shema for that eventuality. But that's how I address the problem. How other rabbis would address it, I can't say. Good. Let's go further. Okay, then he goes into other cases of knots that you can handle and so forth, and that's really the end of the perek. So that's one perek. That's an important perek. Shin Yud Zayin, which is about the tying and untying. Okay, now the next one, Shin Yud Chet, Din Hamavashal b'Shabbat, someone who cooked on Shabbat. So now this is not Dinei Bishul. It's not what can you do to prepare food to ensure that you didn't cook. It's what do you do if somebody actually did cook. So it's basically what can you and what can't you benefit from when it comes to another Jew's Chilul Shabbos.
Or it could be not Shabbos, so a sick person.
Yeah, well, it's mutter to be Machala Shabbos. Yeah, that's an example. Right.
No, but then someone can't benefit. Only the sick person can.
This is the question that we're going to see addressed. The other question is, what if it was by mistake? I mean, I'll give you an example. A friend of mine told me they once went to someone for Shabbos lunch. They arrived for Shabbos lunch, and they saw that on the hot tray, the person had food with a lot of sauce. Now, what's the law when it comes to those hot trays? You're allowed to put food on as long as it basically doesn't have sauce.
Was the person Yemenite?
No, they were not Yemenite. Nice try. So they were. Now we would say that's bishul on Shabbat, but it was bishul b'shogeg. Right? It was an accidental bishul. They didn't mean to be bashal. They thought that since it was on hot day, that's all right. Is the guest allowed to eat such food? Is the host allowed to eat such food? What do we do in such a situation? So the Mishna Brura again.
Totally.
Yeah, it was
the
cooked.
meat is there, the roast is there, and there's a sauce around it. The food is cooked 101%. So the sauce is not about adding flavor or adding anything, it's just.
No, but you're still cooking.
If there's a little sauce, that's one thing. But if there's a lot of sauce, see, when it comes to liquids, when it comes to solids, the rule is ein bishul achar bishul. Once something's been cooked, it's impossible to cook it again. The way I like to think of this rule is, you can't toast toast. You can only toast bread. You can't toast toast. You can burn toast, but you can't toast toast. Burning is different. Burning's not mavashal or ma'afel. That's not cooking.
Water.
You can?
You can always heat up.
So cooking when it comes to solids, and bishul achar bishul. You can't cook something that's already cooked. Can I send down for a refill, please? You can't cook something that's already cooked. However, when it comes to liquids, what's the difference between cooked water and raw water? Temperature is the only difference. The only difference is temperature. So therefore, when it comes to liquids, every time the liquid cools down and we reheat it, we are machmir that is considered bishul. So that would be the example. So when you got a lot of sauce, the person didn't realize that. There we have the problem. Okay.
On the assumption that it was before, it was colder than yad, so that is good.
Yeah. They took it out of the fridge Shabbos morning, a lot of sauce, put it on the hot plate. That was wrong. What they did was problematic. But they did it b'shogeg. They thought that they were allowed to do it. That's the example that I'm giving you,
Okay.
and let's see what the Mishnah Berurah and the Shulchan Aruch lays down. Now, once again, the Mishnah Berurah's introduction is very important because the Shulchan. Okay, so I'll start with what the Shulchan Aruch says, and then we'll go to the Mishnah Berurah and start seeing some of the different shittahs. Shulchan Aruch says somebody who cooks on Shabbat, and the Ramah adds in, or who does any one of the other malachot, if it's b'mezid, the person who did it is forbidden forever, and for anyone else, it's mutar only on Motzei Shabbat. So, person one, let's say you've got a person who's not religious, he knows he's not allowed to cook on Shabbat, but he cooks on Shabbat anyway. And then Hashem reveals to him the holiness of Shabbos, and he immediately does teshuvah, and he regrets what he's done, and now he wants to know, can he eat this food? He can never eat the food. So can he give the food to his friend? Not for Shabbos. Motzei Shabbos can give the food to his friend. A little bit like climbing the tree, right? You climb the tree on Shabbos and you want to do teshuvah, so what do? You stay in the tree till after Shabbos. Now what if it's b'shogeg? What if he cooked by mistake? So the Shulchan Aruch says, on that day it is forbidden to him and to others, and at night it is permitted even to him immediately. So in other words, says Shulchan Aruch, in all cases, you cannot eat the food on Shabbat. Whether it was b'mezid, it was b'shogeg, no one can eat the food on Shabbat. The only question is, if he did it b'mezid, so then the Shulchan Aruch says that he himself can never ever get benefit from that food.
On Shabbos or...
If he did it b'mezid, he can never ever get it for Shabbos. Whether he did it b'mezid or b'shogeg, no one can use it on Shabbos. That's the opinion of the Mechaber. Okay. Then the Mishnah Berurah goes into this. Firstly, he says exactly what the Ramah said, that it's not only talking about cooking, it's talking about all kinds of malachot. The Mishnah Berurah says cooking is not only cooking food, it's also baking bread, and it's also a number of other things, melting wax. And he goes on to say, he shows you what is included in the scope of bishul. So as I said, melting wax, he says, even heating up things where mud will end up getting heated up, or things like that can be considered, or wet clay that can be considered mavashel. He goes so he says anything that something soft becomes hard through fire, or something hard becomes soft through fire, is mavashel. That's the rule that he gives. So meat would be an example where it's probably gets softer through cooking it, right? And bread would be an example.
Depends how long the meat is.
Yeah, with toast would be an example where something gets harder. Yeah, so I'm not talking about broiling it. I'm talking about boiling it in the pot.
So this is Friday night as well, eh? Did you put it in the hot tray before Shabbos?
If you put it before Shabbos, that's a different story. We won't say exactly what that story is now. It's a different ziman in Shulchan Aruch. I'm not saying what you can and can't do. I'm saying what happens. I'm doing Saturday morning.
It doesn't
I
be
can have my roast and my sauce Friday night.
One Shabbos case you can't put it on.
Sure.
Because it's been hot before Shabbos. The temperature has gone down before.
That's been full, eh?
It's not me. It's you.
Oh, well, it actually happened on before Shabbos where I wasn't concentrating and I made tea. Cliche. And then I just left it and said,
Yeah, so look, there are those.
Sure.
Well, you see, I mean, it's a safek. We don't know for sure that he is kalei bishul. We don't know for sure that he is kalei bishul. I mean, it makes sense to say that. It makes sense to say that he's a kalei bishul. That's a good example. So he did it there b'shogeg, so you're not allowed to. Now, this is what I was looking for. The Mishnah Berurah says, if it's derabanan, the Gra shows that if it's b'shogeg, you are allowed to benefit from it on Shabbos. So up till now, we're all talking about it's a doraita. The Zerabanan, the Gra says then if it's b'shogeg, then it's alright. So, I think there's a case of Issa Durabanan, Bishul Durabanan. Yes, could be saying connect to electricity. We tend to view electricity as Durabanan. It's a machloket. We tend to see electricity as Durabanan. So therefore, somebody used electricity by mistake. Can you now get benefit from it? So the Gra said in the Mishnah Berurah quotes him, yes, you can. Now, why can this person who cooked intentionally on Shabbat never ever get benefit from it? So the Mishnah Berurah says, because it's a knas, it's a penalty. it's fine for him breaking Shabbos. He would be allowed to sell it and then use the money, but he can't ever eat that food. Bless you. Now, somebody asked a question about what if somebody. Now there's another thing as well, is that the Mishnah Brura brings as well. There's another issue. If the person cooked intentionally on Shabbat, the other problem is that the pot is not treif. Because since that food is forbidden for him forever, so then it's forbidden. And then the taste of that food is also forbidden for him forever. So if somebody cooked on Shabbat on purpose, he needs to kasher that pot. Right? Which makes sense.
Is that according to Mechaber or is that according to?
According to everything we've seen so far. We're talking somebody who did it b'mezid, not b'shogeg. B'mezid. See, if it's b'shogeg, it's mutar motzei Shabbos, so then it's not treif.
Yeah.
Right? If it's b'mezid and it's asur forever, so then it's treif forever, so that means that the taste of the treif is now absorbed in the pot, so now the pot's treif.
Because there's a B'cholik is by Bishul Yisrael also.
Yeah. Yeah.
Safadim held that you have to kasher. Ashkenazim say no.
Yeah, correct. Okay. Now, what if a Jew cooked for you by mistake on Shabbat? Is there a chumrah on you? Now, remember we said normally when they cook by mistake, it's mutar right after Shabbos. But what if they cook for you?
Right after Shabbos also.
So is that still right after Shabbos? He says yes, that's still right after Shabbos. When it comes to a non-Jew, sometimes we make a chumrah that it's forbidden for the amount of time it takes to make it, so that you won't come to do it out of convenience. But for a Jew, we're not worried that you're going to get a fellow Jew to break Shabbos on your behalf, so that's...
So that you can eat it after Shabbos.
Exactly, that we're not going to worry about it. Okay, now there was something... Yeah. I just wanted to see if there's anything else over here. Okay. Now what's shogeg over here? Either he thought the halacha was different, or he forgot what the halacha was. Anything like that, that's shogeg. In other words, he did it not knowing that he was actually breaking Shabbos. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. Now, the Mishna Brura brings a very important Mishna Brura in halacha, in Mishna Brura Sif Katan Zion. The reason I say it's very important is because it relates directly to our case of where you went out for lunch. So coming back to the scenario, you went out for lunch and you discover that your hosts have this, it's even just make it much more clear. They have soup. You arrive there and they've got soup there waiting for lunch, and you hear the Baalat Habayit say, yes, I cooked the soup before Shabbos, put it in the fridge, and now I've taken it off the fridge and put it on the stove. Because I will put it on the hot plate. Because I know that if I've got a blech, it's okay. That's not correct, right? You can hear it's a mistake. She's trying to keep Shabbos, but what she's done is a problem. And it's your first time in her home, and she's watching to see if you're going to eat the butternut soup.
You don't like butternut?
Oh yeah.
You don't like butternut?
Did you have to tell her?
According to Shulchan Aruch, what would you say?
No, but
according to Shulchan Aruch, you cannot eat the soup. According to Shulchan Aruch, you cannot eat the soup. He says it was a malacha by mistake, but so therefore it's only forbidden until the end of Shabbos. But it's still forbidden at the end of Shabbos. According to Shulchan Aruch, you must say to her, my dear, I'm very grateful for, it's not appropriate to say my dear, don't call her my dear. I'm very grateful for the soup, but I must just tell you that this was not done in the correct way. I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to eat it. However, so I'll just tell you, there's a couple of stories like that. Now there was one thing that that in Lithuania, just once we're on the topic, I'll just mention. I don't want too many digressions because there's so much to get through, and I'm not going to get there. But okay, we're learning nicely. So in Lithuania, when a new rabbi would come to the community, they would provide a spread, like a bracha, that they come. But that was really a test. They didn't always tell the rabbis. It was really a test to see that he said the bracha in the right order. Let's say you've got grapes and pomegranates and dates. Is he going to remember to say the right one? What would you say on first? Grapes, pomegranates, dates.
Get somebody.
Dates. Olives, dates, grapes, figs, pomegranates. Yeah, but which one do you choose for that bracha, right? So now there are such questions. So there was one of the rabbis. And if you got grapes and cake, what do you say on? Cake. So this rabbi forgot. He was nervous. Whatever it was, he went for the grapes. So the chairman walks over to him and says, "Rabbi, you didn't say on the cake first." Now they're thinking they've got an amaretz. So he says, "I don't eat cake." And for the rest of his life, never ate cake. Because he had to decide in that moment, am I going to lie, in order to protect myself, whatever else, or am I going to make a decision that from this point on, I'm never going to eat cake again? So if you choose to do that you're going to take, so to speak, the proverbial bullet, and you're going to say to the lady, I don't eat butternut soup. Okay, so then you never eat, butternut soup. Good, you've avoided embarrassing her. You've given up butternut soup. However, this is very important, Judas, even more important than your clever joke. Even more important than your clever joke, if you can believe such a thing. That's all. What else can you say? I mean, you can either explain it nicely or find something to that. Shulchan Aruch says you can't eat it. But this is what I'm saying. There's a very important Mishna Brura that I'm trying to tell you. Mishna Brura says the Shulchan Aruch is following one opinion in the Gemara. Is following the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who is strict on this matter. However, the Vilna Gaon says we follow Tosfot and others who follow Rabbi Meir. And Rabbi Meir is much more lenient. Rabbi Meir says he takes the whole thing a step down. Remember, according to Rabbi Yehuda, if it was b'mezid, asur to everyone till Motzei Shabbos, and him forever, and if it was b'shogeg, asur to everyone till Motzei Shabbos. Rabbi Meir says, if it was b'mezid, it's asur for everyone till Motzei Shabbos. And if it was b'shogeg, it's mutar to everyone on Shabbos. And therefore the Shulchan Aruch says, the Mishnah Brura says, "B'makom hatzorich yesh lismoch al zeh b'bishul b'shogeg." In a case of need, you can rely on this when it comes to cooking on Shabbos. When it comes to cooking b'shogeg on Shabbos. So, why am I telling you all of this? Because I once found myself in such a situation. And we went to people for lunch, and I think I won't give anything away if I'll say it was in this community. It was still fairly new here, and it was people who were having us over for the first time, and they were very nervous about having the rabbi and whatever else, and they had liquidy meal that they'd put on the hot plate on Shabbat day. And they were serving it, and Aviva came over to me and she said, "I just want to tell you that this is what's going on. You need to tell me what we're going to do, because they're watching very anxiously to see if we're going to eat their food or not. We're coming around for Shabbos lunch. They wanted, if we're just going to have water and pravitas, then they're going to feel very shit. Yeah, you got it. So I made the decision that we would.
That's why you became vegetarian.
So we would eat that meal. We would eat that meal. I said, sorry, we would eat that meal, but then we would find a way to convey the halacha at an appropriate time. So that's like a personal. Maybe it was the right decision, maybe the wrong decision. I think in the situation, I think probably it was the right decision. Others may have done differently, but I was thinking, I was basing it on this Vilna Gaon that the Mishnah quotes. Ba'et hatzorich yesh lismoch al zeh. Your time of need, you can rely on this. And again, it would have been very embarrassing for them. So I think that qualified as a time of need. Also, I was really hungry. Now, I'm just joking. That was not a factor. Okay. Now we're coming to Nisses. Although maybe you could say that if you're very hungry. I mean, I said it as a joke. Makom hatzorech. Time of tzorech. So what's considered tzorech? That you have to look into. Okay. They quote here, Rav Chaim Kanievsky and Rav Nissen Karelitz, Hakol tali lefi ha'inyan ve'hamatzav. Everything depends on the idea and the situation. And a chacham must decide based on the situation. So you got to make a judgment call. That's the answer that they're saying. Okay. Now coming back to Nissan's question that you asked earlier, what about somebody was sick and you're doing this malacha on Shabbos for somebody who's really sick? So the Shulchan Aruch says if you're shechting for a sick person, then everyone else is allowed to eat from it. If you shecht, but if you're cooking for the sick person, everyone else is not allowed. Why not?
Because then you might just add.
That's right. They're making the stew. You say, "Oh, stew that looks delicious. I'll also have some." So then they're going to put in some more. Whereas if you're not going to say, "Well, I mean, one cow. I'm not sure if that's really enough. Right? I better go shecht another cow." Right? There's going to be plenty. The Ramah adds in this applies even if the malacha is being done by a non-Jew. Okay. Now he says, what if you cut fruit? What if you plucked fruit on Shabbos? You've got strawberries growing in your garden, and the sick person, desperately, the only thing that's going to save their life is they need to eat strawberries. So I went and picked strawberries, and there's some strawberries that are left over. So are you allowed to eat those strawberries? The answer is no. There's a difference when it comes to strawberries.
So then they'll just pluck an extra juice.
No, that's not the concern. It's good thinking, but that isn't the concern. The concern is that the strawberries are muktzah. When it comes to strawberries were growing on Shabbos. For example, if you have an apple that was growing on a tree when Shabbos came in, even if the apple falls off, you can't go and eat that apple on Shabbos because it was muktzah when Shabbos came in. So it's the exact same thing over here. So those strawberries were muktzah when Shabbos came in.
So when it was plucked, the use was only for that person.
Mm-hmm.
So for you, there was no use. You as the person, there was no use.
It's not that there's no use. I mean, the use is in, but it wasn't there when Shabbos came. If something's muktzah when Shabbos comes in, it can't become un-muktzah on Shabbos.
Yeah. It's not chatzir.
So at that point when Shabbos came in, it was muktzah. Now for a sick person, just like you can break Shabbos from, you can have muktzah. But that was the idea. Okay. Now next halakha, just like you're not allowed to cook for someone else, you're not allowed to. Oh, no, there's a different thing. Just as you're not allowed to cook with fire, you're not allowed to cook with a tolda of fire. What does it mean, the tolda of fire?
Like a hot plate.
Like a hot?
A hot plate.
Oh, no, so that's also, that would either, let's say that's considered fire itself. The tolda of fire is the hot frying pan that's been sitting on the fire. Cooking on fire is that I'm holding it on the fire on the frying pan. The tolda of fire is I heat up the frying pan, take the frying pan off the fire, crack the egg into the frying pan. That's cooking on a tolda of fire. Now here's an interesting one. You're not allowed to cook on a tolda of the sun either.
So
It's a boiling hot day. Somebody was telling me Greg Gelb was in Las Vegas. It's in the middle of the desert, middle of summer. He says he was walking around outside or whatever. He pulled out his phone to use it. It says, phone is overheating. Can't use your phone. Right? It was so hot that it wouldn't let him use the phone. Now, in that situation, you could take a frying pan, leave it outside. That frying pan will heat up in the sun, get proper hot, crack an egg into it on Shabbos, and cook the egg. In principle, you're allowed to do that. That's not the malacha of bishul. The malacha of bishul is bishul the fire. This is not a fire.
So you wouldn't be able to use like those.
But it's not even a told of a fire.
The solar cooker.
It's told of it's the sun. The sun is a different thing.
But you wouldn't be able to use a solar cooker on Shabbos then.
Well, let's just understand why. So, even though in principle you can do it, you're not allowed to do it. Because what's going to happen is, Elon's going to see me cooking my eggs on a frying pan, and he's going to think that I heated it up on the fire, and he's going to come to the conclusion that as long as the frying pan isn't on the fire, it's fine, right? And so the way Shulchan puts it, you're going to get confused between the tolda of the sun and the tolda of fire. Tolda of fire is asur d'oraita. Tolda of the sun is really mutar d'oraita, but asur d'rabbanan, so you don't get mixed up.
It's just the modifier.
So therefore, exactly, as a friend of mine says, if they can't get you on anything else, they'll get you at my side. Therefore, similarly, you're not allowed to put it cook something in the sand or anything like that, these kind of things. However, you are allowed to cook in the sun itself. So, for example, I would be allowed to take my eggs on Shabbos. I've got some tinfoil that I've cut already. Again, Las Vegas, middle of summer. I put the tinfoil out on the balcony. I crack the eggs that are designated for food, Erev Shabbos. Crack the eggs onto that tinfoil. The sun beating down cooks those eggs.
No,
Beseder Gamur.
so my question was that do you have a designated solar cooker?
Yes. Now, how the solar cooker works, I don't know.
No, you use the rays of the sun and it intensifies it.
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
I just can't comment on it intelligently. But you take these principles. If you say that it works, then there you go. I mean, just check it before you go ahead and do it.
No. Too much effort. But
Yeah.
I've got 2 questions.
Yes, pick one. No, I'm just joking. Go for it.
So my first one is,
You have to tell us. You have to tell us.
are you allowed to like crack it on your car, I guess?
So the question would come, is it now getting cooked because the car is so hot? Or is it getting cooked because the sun is so hot? You're allowed to cook it with the heat of the sun. You're not allowed to cook it with the heat of your car.
It's hot.
So that's why I use my example of the tinfoil. Because the tinfoil, it's not cooking from the heat of the tinfoil.
Oh, good example.
You don't use the sun to cook eggs.
Yes.
Like that.
Yes, and then
Mutar lechachila. Halacha lemaisa. Check with your father, because I want to tell you things without your father, right? But you look at the Shulchan Aruch. Halacha lemaisa, and the Mishnah Brura goes along with that as well.
You'd be allowed to, like a lot of kids love melting chocolate in the sun, so you could do it.
Yes, you can melt chocolate in the sun.
Or it's the sun.
No, would it be? It depends how hot you could make. I mean, it depends how hot you would make it.
I've got a question.
If you make it into a hot liquid, I mean, it's unlikely you'll manage to get that.
My second question is, are you allowed to use something to make it hotter? For example, I could have my tinfoil and then have a magnifying glass, take the sun and concentrate it on the...
Yes, so magnifying glass with the hand seems also to be fine. That would also. If you would use it to make fire, that would be perhaps a separate issue. But here we're saying again, I'm just cooking with the sun. It sounds similar to Hananiah's case of the solar heater. Could be the exact same. There is plenty more to do. We've done about a third of the syllabus for tonight, maybe as much as half, probably more like a third. But we've done some good learning, fascinating stuff. And please God, we'll continue next time.